right, welcome to the Meat Dudes. I'm Evan.
Tyler, as always.
Yeah, we're joined today by Arlie Reeves of Bar R Wagyu. It's so good to see you, Arlie. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me, Evan and Tyler. Glad to be on.
Yeah, no, well, we've been following you. We've been watching you go down to South America and go to all these different farms and Wagyu farms down in South America. So we were like, we got to have you on. We got to talk about the trip and talk about Wagyu, where it's at in South America, but also you've traveled all over, to many Wagyu farms all around the world. And I think that we would love to hear about kind of your experiences and learn more about Wagyu around the world, because we know it from Japan and we know it from, the United States. We talk a lot about that, even some in Australia, but where else is this happening? What are the trends? What are you seeing? How are they doing it? And I'd love to just kind of hear about it. So let's start by hearing about your trip down to South America. How'd that go?
It was a trip of a lifetime. Anytime we get out off the farm and see other farms and ranchers, we're thrilled. And so we had the opportunity to visit some family friends, the Zanellas, and it's a neat story in which Ricardo and Geraldo Zanella came up to the States for their graduate degrees, masters and PhDs in animal science in the early 2000s. And they came from a family farm in Brazil. They met my dad in the early 2000s through their studies at Washington State University, got to learn about the Wagyu because at that time, my dad was a professor at Washington State and the university had a Wagyu program. So they took that knowledge back to Brazil and started converting their family farm to a Wagyu ranch. And so they do a little bit of Maine and Jew cattle as well as Wagyu now, but they've been doing that since 2000.
What was that first cattle you mentioned? I don't know what that is.
It's a European breed, Maine and Jew. They're beautiful cattle, usually white and red. In the south part of Brazil, there's a very heavy dominance of European cattle. That climate is not the tropical climate of northern Brazil, so it's much more in line with Europe and the US kind of climate. So the European cattle and the Wagyu do very well in the south.
Cool. Okay. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So you got down. So you were in Brazil, right, visiting them. And so what is it? Is Wagyu as popular down there? Because when I think of South America, I think of Argentina and all the cattle and the wine down there. That was what our master Sam always told us. Like, if you want the best place for beef and wine, you go to Argentina.
Absolutely.
So I think we know about some of the some things happening down there. But what about Brazil and other areas? How is the Wagyu trend industry taking off?
It's growing. I think around the world, Wagyu is one of the faster breeds that is gaining interest all over the world, not just South America. So it's small though still. And I feel like the Wagyu has taken off faster in the US over the last 30 years. I mean, the majority of Americans recognize that term. It's, I think, still a term that is understood in Brazil and throughout South America, but it's definitely still in its infancy, I would say. So to put things into perspective, in Brazil has 232 million head of cattle.
Okay.
Dang.
232 million head. There's
Yeah.
about 7,000 purebred Wagyu there. So like 0.00001% of their cattle industry is Wagyu. I mean, it's so tiny, right? So, but the culture around beef, the culture around livestock in all of South America is really strong. I would say it might be even stronger than it is up here in America. And so that culture of eating more beef, eating beef in a lot of the meals is very strong. And so I see the opportunity for Wagyu. It's just massive there. But obviously it has to grow, and the breed can only grow as fast as the animals can reproduce and grow, and so it's a slow process.
Definitely.
So did they have some of your blood lineage down there?
They did. So in the early 2000s, we sent some semen down there, and so they started breeding the cattle. Now, the first Wagyu cows to go into Brazil was actually in 1992. The Yakutsk family and that business, it's a Japanese-owned business, actually imported cattle into Brazil in 1992. And it really wasn't until the early 2000s that other breeders got to bring in more genetics. And so, yes, some of ours got to go down there as early as 2002.
Cool. Dang, dude. That's crazy. So, I mean, the culture around beef down in South America is super exciting and prominent. And so, you'd think that Wagyu would take off pretty quickly because, I mean, people want to eat better beef. And Wagyu usually is better beef when raised correctly and all that. So that's interesting though. So what stage is that? Are they still like? Are they calling it Kobe beef down there like we did in the States for so long, or is that even a thing? Where is it at?
I say it's more in its infancy still, and I say that to the US Wagyu market too. But in some ways, in one way in particular, the Brazilians are actually ahead of us in their certified Wagyu program. And so they actually have a label that is a certified Wagyu label administered through their government and their Wagyu association. So they have field folks that work for the association. They go out to these farms and ranches that certify the animals are Wagyu all along the process, from birth to weaning to feeding and to processing. And so that Wagyu label, they're using that, and that's a really incredible value add to any product to be able to stamp that product with a label. So in the US, our Wagyu label, there is one being worked out through the USDA. It will come into effect in the next year or so, but the Brazilians and the South Africans actually both have a certified Wagyu program that allows them to use that label.
Really? That's
Is this as intricate, I guess, is the question, as the American Wagyu Association, like the charts and the birth weight and the hanging weight and all the other things that I learned when we came to the auction. It's a same way as that.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, and every country does a little bit different. Every country is subject to their own government regulations around agriculture, around these certifications and registrations. So there are some differences throughout the countries. But as a member of the American Wagyu Association, I have the pleasure of serving on the board. And there's actually what they call a World Wagyu Council. And that World Wagyu Council is comprised of different Wagyu associations from around the world. And the purpose of it is to collaborate and promote cooperation throughout the world for all of us raising Wagyu to promote the Wagyu breed worldwide. Maybe talk about our certification programs for beef. Maybe talk about our registration processes, what works, what doesn't. And really, the Wagyu is such a small percentage of the cattle industry worldwide that even across country borders, we're trying to work together.
well. Who's involved in that worldwide Wagyu council? I mean, are there, the U.S., South America, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, I'm guessing, but are there other countries that we don't really think about, we don't associate Wagyu with yet?
Um, there's a few in addition to the list that you've named, some in Europe, there's Germany, there's the UK, there's Namibia, South Africa, a handful of South American countries. It's really open to any country that has its own association. And so, but Australia, New Zealand, it's just a great growing group of leaders from each country's association that all have one mission that they share.
Yeah, push Wagyu and get it to the public, and I'm sure like education has got to be a huge thing in that council that you talk about all the time because we're still hearing about it. I mean, I posted a video yesterday. I was holding up a zabuton, a full blood zabuton, in front of the camera, and I said, like, you could go buy a New York strip from some crazy grocery store, or you could buy this for $18 for cheaper than you could buy that New York strip. And somebody posted, "Oh, no Wagyu is ever sold for $18." And I'm like, bro, I'm literally holding a piece right in front of the camera. And even if it wasn't Wagyu, it still looks like incredible. But it's just funny. I'm like, we actually sell this. So there's still a lot of education that needs to happen. I'm sure that's at the forefront of that council.
Now you said down there, purebred.
I say that again?
You said it was purebred at the ranch you were at.
There's both purebred and full blood, but what's interesting in Brazil is there's actually it's either considered full blood 100% Wagyu or composite or percentage. there's really no indication of a full blood, which is in our country, in the US, 93.75% and above. What happens in Brazil is there's just one or two of these designations. The interesting thing is they could breed up to 99.99% and eventually graduate that animal into the purebred, the full blood category. But they're really just looking at two different classifications, whereas in the US we have a percentage, a purebred and a full blood, which is confusing in and of itself.
Do you ever see that becoming some worldwide standard where everybody has the purebred and everybody has the F1 cross, or is that just something that's...
I think we're always going to see these slight differences in how these countries and associations deal with these things. Just like anything else, we might come close, but at the end of the day, there will be these differences. I don't think it'll standardize entirely.
It'd be nice to have that beef marbling scale to be somewhat standardized.
World beef marbling.
Yes, yes, right? Like, just it'd be cool because, I mean, everybody, I bought some Wagyu from the grocery store the other day just to like try it out. And it was like graded 4 out of 5, premium marbling. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, it's just at some point we're just making it up, so, and it wasn't that great, to be honest. But
yeah, there's a lot of variations. And at least these certification programs do have a quality minimum, which I think is so important with the Wagyu. You can't just label anything Wagyu and ensure that level of quality. So, but where that minimum level is set, country by country, association by association may differ. So,
how much of the beef did you taste when you were down there?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'd like to say almost every meal.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we went down end of August, early September, was because we called our friends and said, when's the best time to come? And they said, we think you'd really enjoy seeing X Pointer, which is a big ag expo. It's actually the largest livestock show in all of Latin America. So we went to Brazil at that time so we could be in attendance of that livestock show, and our friends took their own Wagyu there. They showed, they competed. They actually won the national female champion this year. And what was amazing to see is there was like 30 different breeds of cattle represented, including the native cattle there, which are Brahma, Gujarat, and there's one more come to mind. But there's a lot of Bos Indicus cattle there in the north because it's very hot and humid. There's the cattle that have the lump on their back, on their neck there, the Bos Indicus, they do much better in that kind of tropical climate than a lot of our European cattle do. The Nelore is the other native breed there. And so seeing those beautiful cattle with all different colorations and hides that are just the most beautiful things you've ever seen. Long ears, big eyes. We even saw water buffalo. And the neat thing about the livestock show, and I know you didn't ask this question, but I have to share it because it was the neatest part of our trip, I think, was going to see this huge expo where hundreds of thousands of people attended that don't normally get to see livestock and cattle. And not only were these cattle there representing their breeds and competing in a show, where you're leading them around and they get ribbons and trophies at the end of the day, but a lot of the breeds had a restaurant tied to its breed in the vicinity. And so people could see the cattle, but they could also go to the Angus restaurant or the Hereford restaurant or the Charlet or the Buffalo restaurant and enjoy beef from that breed in that kind of setting. And I've never seen that before. And it's something I take with me because being able to show consumers the differences in breeds and differences in what you can achieve with flavor of beef, it's all fantastic. But it was just a neat experience to see those restaurants representing the breeds. And the Wagyu restaurant is in the works for next year. So there wasn't one this year, but next year we fully expect to see it there and representing the Wagyu breed.
Wow.
Maybe we should open one in your neck of the woods.
Yes, Bar R.
Bar R Wagyu tasting. Come on.
Yes.
I'll leave that to you guys. You're the experts in the restaurant hearing.
Perfect.
I'll call you after the podcast.
Yeah, we'll get it rolling. Great. So South America, we know, is getting there. Very heavy in beef, really, really culturally significant down there. What other places have you traveled to where you've seen, visited Wagyu farms, and what are they like?
I've had the opportunity to visit farms throughout Europe, but my bigger trips focused on Wagyu were in Australia, where the ranches or stations, as they call them, are massive most of the time. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of acres, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of cattle. Australia runs a lot of Bos Indicus cattle as well, Brahma, and they actually cross them with Wagyu too, so a little bit
Yeah.
different than North American crosses. Um, but everywhere you go, the people are just incredible. So Brazil, so welcoming, so willing to share. And even if we had to use Google Translate because my Portuguese is not good, we were able to do a lot of learning and exchange. And same with Australia, the farmers there are just incredible. Even though we do things differently, I think we can relate on the lifestyle and
Yeah.
some of the same challenges. We also got to travel to South Africa in 2019, right before COVID hit, and it visit some Wagyu ranches down there and some auctions and conferences. And that again was incredible, learning about their certified Wagyu program, how they're selling their beef. It just really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And one thing in particular that I think we in America are a little bit more ahead in, maybe it's because our system allows for direct to consumer a little bit easier than these other countries' systems. But I noticed that there wasn't as much direct to consumer happening in Australia or South Africa or even Brazil. And it's not because the farmers don't want to go that path, it's just the logistics of being able to process their beef, get it back, and then develop that direct to consumer market is just something that's not as strong as it is here in the US.
Okay, I see that.
In
Yeah.
all of your travels, I know every ranch and every farm, even yours that we've gone to, everybody has their kind of specific practice, specific feed, how they finish,
Yeah.
how big they want their cattle to be at harvest. Did you see a bunch of differentiation in all of your travels in those kind of those?
Yes, and sometimes it's that way because the ecosystem and environment requires it. You know,
Yeah.
you see more of the grass fed in Brazil and Australia because they have the ability to do grass fed more than we might here in northern US where we have tough winters and the grain is really integral to getting that marbling on the Wagyu. So you do see differences, but I think everyone's trying to achieve the same goal, the highest quality beef they can achieve, good animal welfare practices, doing things the right way, using technology as we can and as it develops to better our systems. I think I see that throughout the world.
That's great.
Yeah.
And regulated by the World Wagyu Council.
Yes.
I
Oh,
I I think yeah, that it really doesn't have the power to regulate anything, but it has the power to bring us all together to talk about these issues. One of the things they're really working on to your point that you made earlier is education and also really putting our priority into getting more science-based research completed at universities. You can't really make decisions unless you have real science-backed data to really kind of move forward. And so looking at different lipid profiles, comparing Wagyu fat to other breeds fat and how that composition differs and how those health outcomes differ. And then looking at best feeding practices. I mean, all these can be done in scientific studies. And so really trying to push that within our own countries and university and research institutions is one thing the council is trying to do.
That's cool.
is there programs in other countries like there is at your when your dad was a professor? Is there other colleges in the world that are trying to do this also?
There are, and I think they're smaller scale, but seeing down in Brazil, the University of Passo Fundo is where our friends were professors at. It's a veterinary school, and they do a lot of work on Wagyu there, as well as dairy breeds. It really takes someone in a position like a professor at a university to really make that happen a lot of time to bring a program like that and convince a university to invest in it and do research. But I am seeing more of that around the world, and that's really exciting.
Cool.
So let's think. We got, you know, I mean, everything originated in Japan, and you've seen it obviously in the States, in South America, Brazil, South Africa, and Australia, New Zealand, and even in Europe. So like what, who's the farthest along, besides obviously where it originated in? Where do you see that there, people are putting the most organizations in place and things like that? Like, is anyone really moving into really being that, competing with, not competing with Japan, but I mean like getting close to that stage? Do you see anything like that, or who's kind of like up and coming and next and things like
Definitely. I think every country has its own advantages, and this is all my personal opinion and what I see, but I think even if one country is ahead of another, that doesn't limit that other country's potential. And I think the domestic markets within our countries are going to be more and more important. But when you look at a country like Australia, they export a high percentage of their beef, and particularly Wagyu. We're seeing more and more Australian Wagyu in America. We're seeing more and more of it around the world. They have a huge export market in Wagyu. They've been doing it for a long time and they're good at it. And so it is hard to compete with those export markets. Brazil, if they get to the point where they can produce enough Wagyu to export, they're one of the biggest exporters of beef in the world. They've been doing it forever. They're fantastic at it. And so there's going to be, I think we have to be realistic about where our best advantages are within each country. And for us, personally, I think it's going to be more of a direct to consumer market here in Washington State for us. But every country is going to be a little bit different. And Brazil and Australia particularly have big export markets, that we're seeing that beef all around the world.
interesting? Gosh, it's crazy to see all around the, like, I don't think about it, and all we hear about is Japan, US, and in Australia, maybe a little bit in South America, but yeah, I think mostly, prime beef down in Argentina. So, I mean, but obviously it's got to be expanding all around the world. I mean, the word is getting out. I mean, you go to fine dining restaurants all over the world, and I'm sure it's going to be on most of their menus nowadays. So it's cool to see how fast this is gonna go. I always compare it like to the cannabis industry, where it's like, nobody really talked about it for a while. It's kind of underground, and then boom, it really took off with the general public. About 8 to 10 years ago. But it's to me, it's this next really booming industry because everybody wants to have better beef, and it's not impossible to do. We're seeing it done in all these different countries. We're seeing it done well. And I think with, all these cool councils being set up and you traveling all around and spreading the word, I mean, I think it's going to hit pretty soon. Where do you see Wagyu beef in the next 10 years? Let's ask that. Where do you think it's going to be?
The next 10 years, I'd like to see it be more accessible while still maintaining the excellence and quality that we hope to see and we're seeing now. I just hope that I think of it a lot like the wine market, where there's going to be differences in quality, differences in taste, and everyone's going to have different preferences, and there's a place for it all. But I'd like to see it more accessible. I'd like to see it, I think, looked to as not just an excellent product on the plate, but an excellent cow. So from a cattleman's perspective, Wagyu are a little bit smaller, a little bit more finer boned. They don't pack quite as much muscle as the traditional European beef breeds. And so I wouldn't say they're looked down upon, but in some ways they are looked down upon
Yeah.
by the cattlemen. And so I'd like to see them really be respected in terms of they make a great steak, but they're also incredibly versatile cattle that can do well in Canada in the winters, in northern Canada, in the southern part of Texas, South America, all these places, Wagyu can thrive. They might be traditionally a black cattle, but talking to the Brazilians, they're saying that the Bos Indicus cattle are way better at handling the heat and the ticks and all that comes with that environment. But
Yeah,
the black Wagyu cattle and the red Wagyu cattle are also really, they do better than a lot of the European breeds. They do better than the Angus in those climates. And
really.
so they're a really hardy breed. And maybe that goes back to when they're in Japan and they were used as draft animals.
Yeah,
Also, I think there's some historical context there, but I would just love to see them be a breed that's highly respected and regarded, and that the breed is upheld. I think all of the countries around the world do a great job at giving credit to the Japanese and paying tribute to what the Japanese have provided us with this breed of cattle. So paying tribute to the Japanese, but also adapting to our unique environments to raise the best beef possible.
yeah.
Totally.
And that is a big thing that I think we need to talk about is the quality. Like once something does get too big and too mainstream, you find it can be bad, poor quality. So how does Wagyu over the next 10, 20 years really keep that same quality and perfection and um, how do you see that happening actually?
I think like anything else, ranchers and those who work in our industry just have to get better at what we do. Better at making sure our top priority is safety for the animals and the people that work for us, and that the quality and the system is being done the right way. And so as things grow and get larger and more industrial, that you run up against these challenges. And so I think we just have to take it upon us as producers and folks in the industry to do the best job we can do, make sure we're not growing too fast so that we can maintain that quality and the standards that we need to see quality wise, but animal husbandry wise, all across the board. So that, and I think the slow growth is a better approach than fast growth.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, you can keep an eye on it, and then people aren't just jumping in just because it's hot. That's what we don't need that, that, oh, hey, yeah, we're gonna do this because it's cool and it's selling. Like, well, it's there is still, it goes back to Japan. There's still a way to raise these animals the right way. And it is a little bit different. So I think it's cool to meet people in the Wagyu industry because so many of them have such a passion and desire to keep it the quality in this beautiful breed and keep it, moving forward positively and not letting the wrong people jump in there and just try to, make a profit because it's hot. So I love that.
Yeah.
What you
Are you
guys?
guys, are you seeing more Wagyu from Australian Wagyu coming in? What's your perspective on the Wagyu you're seeing in Seattle?
I don't know. I think that we're still seeing more American Wagyu, and
Yeah,
that education right there is kind of a big conundrum because you're like, oh, is it American Wagyu? Well, that's not real Wagyu.
yeah,
We get that a lot.
yeah.
Well, let's talk. Let's sit down and talk about this.
The verbiage.
So, I mean, like you said, I think education is such a huge thing for you guys, for us as consumers, us as having a small little meat counter, and really letting people know your story, the quality story, the slow growth story. Like that's all we can really do to help you guys and the Wagyu industry as a whole. So I don't I don't really see a whole lot of Australian, honestly.
Yeah.
I see a lot of American Wagyu, but there's a couple restaurants that are specifically Australian Wagyu here in the city too.
Yeah. I see it, like I say, in the grocery store. You're talking about how it's exported. So when I see grocery store Wagyu, for the most part, in like common chain grocery stores, it's usually that Australian or New Zealand grass fed. Um, that's what I see. But for us here, I mean, we really like to try to stay as local as possible. So we see a lot of American, and we've been talking to a lot of producers, kind of all over. And it is funny how you brought up that American Wagyu, just that label. I think some people call full, we call it all full blood when it's that 93% or 97%, and then we call it American Wagyu if it's F1 cross. I think a lot of people kind of confuse that. So common verbiage I think would really help moving forward if we could just call it one thing. But I think that, yeah, when people hear American Wagyu, they don't think it's real. They think it's just some fake thing that's just been, that they're just trying to profit off, off of Japan. So yeah, but for the most part, yeah, like you said, we do a lot of just American Wagyu, the F1 Cross, full blood purebred.
Arlie, what's your favorite steak?
I, as far as what cross or cut?
Yes.
Both. Where do you fall?
Because I know your mom likes she likes the F3, F4, is that right?
Yeah, like 75% Wagyu is what she
Yeah.
prefers.
Yeah.
I'd say I love a good F1 product just because I can eat more of it. I
Yeah.
do a big steak.
We're
And
the
so
same.
Yeah.
yeah, but I appreciate the full blood, the purebred, the Japanese A5. I appreciate it all. It depends on how much I'm wanting to eat, but I'd say the F1. And then favorite cut, I would say a ribeye. The zabuton is great. I ate a lot of picanhas in Brazil. That was
Yeah. Awesome.
going to the stores and seeing it everywhere. I mean, it was incredible. It really opened my eyes to how big that cut is down there.
Crazy.
Oh yeah. Did you see any other really popular cuts down there that they sell a lot of, or the things that you don't see up here?
I would say the picanha was the biggest. Sometimes when you go to the barbecues, the way they cook them, you can't exactly tell what cuts they are, and they'll usually tell you. But a lot of the similar ones that we see here, they had certain dishes that the hump on the Bos Indicus cattle, they would eat that, which is a very fatty cut. So
Oh,
that was popular in the Brazilian barbecues. There were cow, eating intestines or like stomachs and different parts of the kind of the offal that normally we're not as used to eating in America. That was very delicious. I mean, everything we had down there was fantastic.
I would be curious to like take a world survey because I think a lot of us Americans would say a Hollywood cut. That's just because that's who we are, right? Ribeyes, New York's, tenderloins. But you go to Brazil, you have picanha. I would be curious to see, like in France, there's a lot of bavette. There's a lot of like abdominal muscles and stuff for steak frites and things like that.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of cool to put like a little worldly chart together and see like in South Africa, they love a whatever,
Yeah, what do they eat down there? Do you see anything different down there in South Africa?
A lot of the same cuts. One of the things that stuck out to me in South Africa is their differences in making jerky and beef sticks. Like the biltong is huge down there. And I love South African biltong. And I've seen it here in the States too. They export some of it, but it's a meat dehydration process. I thought it was delicious.
Huh.
But again, it tastes, that it tastes great everywhere you go. And you could definitely taste those differences, right? When you try beef from different parts of the world, even if it's the same breed, there are pretty stark differences in taste still.
I can tell just walking into the grocery store, and if it's a Wagyu label, like I know if it's Australian just because of the color of the fat.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like almost immediately.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the problem is, though, a lot of those chain stores, it doesn't necessarily even say it's from Australia or if it's grass. The labeling is a big issue, I think, in the beef world, and consumers want to know. But if they can't know, I mean, you can't blame them for having a distrust for the industry if we're not able to put labels on there that accurately represent where the beef is from and what it is. So we need to work on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, I want to get back to that hump. What is that? Like, is it a muscle with a big layer of fat, like the picanha or culotte, or is it just mostly fat with a little bit of beef?
I've only been exposed to it a little bit, so I've never broken one down myself to see it. I'm sure you could look up videos on it. But the primary purpose for it is those cattle often have to store water for longer times. Like they may be in an area that's very tropical and maybe they can't access water, similar to a camel hump, right?
Yeah, totally.
It contains water. And so it's mostly fatty as far as I understand it, but it still tastes pretty darn good to me. So
no doubt.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look into it.
Yeah, we should smoke one.
Smoke a hump.
Yeah, they say it's similar to a brisket. Again, I haven't broken it broken one down myself. Just we don't have Boston Indicus cattle around here, but
Yeah,
yeah, look into it.
I can't
yeah,
imagine there's a whole lot of muscle structure going on up there. It's just kind of
No.
chilling out.
yeah. Nice and tender.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. See, that sounds
Shabu shabu.
shabu shabu.
I
Yeah.
think I got this hat actually from the Brazilian Wagyu Association and
No.
had their flag on it, and all
Cool.
the association employees and members were wearing it at this show that I went to. And I
Yes.
think one of the neatest things is hearing the stories from folks like my dad that were in the Wagyu industry from the get-go, wherever they're from, right? And
Yeah.
so in Brazil, talking to the Zanellas and the early 2000s and how it's adapted and how they as professors have been preaching about Wagyu to their students and how it's slowly over 20 years finally kind of catching on. And there are so many people like my dad around the world that are spearheading these breeds and of you know just new era things like the Wagyu, and even talking to Rogerio, who was involved in the first imports, and he was a veterinarian for that ranch, hearing those early stories that honestly aren't written down anywhere. They're just passed by word of mouth after a few drinks, right? And it's
Yeah.
incredible to see that. And so I feel as like a young producer, the responsibility to try and document more of that and get that written down so that as history goes on, we don't lose those stories and that history of Wagyu, wherever it might be, Brazil, South Africa, Australia. I mean, there's so much to it. So, and you guys as well, you play such an integral part in spreading awareness and educating consumers even more than we do. So thank you for that.
Oh,
Oh,
hey,
thank you.
thanks for being like such a great resource for us too, because it's yeah, so much fun to talk to you and the knowledge that you bring. And I'm always hitting her up still, like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Because I mean, we want, yeah, we have a little bit of a platform. We want to be able to get it out there and educate because it's still, like I said, people come into our butcher shop all the time and they're like, oh no, that's not Wagyu. It's not from Japan. We're like, well, actually, let me tell you a story. And so we get to do a lot of education on a daily basis, learn a lot. But it's really nice to have you who are going out to all these farms around the world, and you're like the right there in the center of it to be able to reach out and talk. So it's been awesome, Arlie. Thank you for joining us today and giving us a little bit of time. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I couldn't not mention the gauchos in South America.
Oh yeah.
Gaucho culture of the way the gauchos dress. Traditionally, it's like a bigger pant that's super comfortable. I mean, I don't know why all of us ranchers up here aren't wearing the gaucho pants because that's where it's at. Those are so nice.
That's
Um, and the gauchos talking to them that are really the true cowboys of South America. My husband, Taylor, he speaks some Spanish, so he was able to understand the Portuguese a little more than me, and he really Google translated with them and got to learn a lot. And just the way you work cattle and building relationships, I mean, it's just such a neat experience to go abroad and learn about all those things. So, uh, maybe one of these days you can get some of those international folks on your podcast too. That'd be
yeah,
Yes.
yes. Oh, that would be awesome. We'll be reaching out to you and seeing who we can get. Anytime. It would be really cool because I think
Evan's on what's your Duolingo streak?
you know what? Honestly, today was day 800, bro. Day
Duolingo
800
Spanish.
on my Duolingo Spanish. So
wow.
yeah, I'm getting there. Yeah, I'm getting there. It's getting better. I don't know if I got to have a full conversation with the
And
gauchos
I know
down
all
there.
the bad words. So
Yeah.
between the two of them,
We
we
can-
should be probably
we're
making
really
down
good.
there somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, awesome, Arlie. Is there anything else you want to let us know about Wagyu around the world, or should we sign this bad boy up here?
I just reiterate the fact that it's amazing how even you can have long-lasting friendships and visit people abroad or meet people for the first time abroad or even meet people on social media that leads to a visit abroad and a friendship over farming and ranching and what we do. And I've just found that the community worldwide is so open and willing to talk and invite and share. And that's just been the biggest takeaway for me is the community within cattle ranching all over, and our relationship with you guys is awesome. So I'm just very privileged and honored to be part of this industry and be on your show today.
Hey, will you do me a favor?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Will you do me a favor? Will you go feed Sugar Tawny a cupcake for me?
I will. You know, he'll be 18 in April, so
I'll make him a cupcake for his birthday.
Yeah, we gotta celebrate it for sure.
that'd be awesome.
Oh man. Well, Arlie, once again, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. We'll be chatting soon, and this podcast will probably go up in the next week or so. I'll let you know, and we'll blast it out and keep rolling, keep the education going. I love it.
Say hi to everybody at the ranch.
Yes, say hi to him. Say hi to Taylor. Absolutely.
Will do. Likewise, guys. Thanks again.
All right,
Bye, Arlie.
thanks, Arlie.